The gavel slammed down like a gunshot in that stuffy boardroom, and my father's voice cut through the silence sharper than any blade. Lorenzo gets it all, the vineyard, the legacy, everything we've built from Napa dirt. I stood there, fists clenched at my sides, feeling the weight of 27 years of unspoken rejection crash over me like a rogue wave off the Pacific, because he didn't even look at me when he said it. Not once, not in the eyes of the son he'd always called the disappointment. Blood roared in my ears as Lorenzo smirked from across the polished oak table, his tailored suit screaming old money while mine hung loose like a kid playing dress-up. "Sorry, Alex," he drawled, all false sympathy dripping like overripe Cabernet. "But Dad knows best. Family tradition and all that." Tradition. That word tasted like ash, because in our world, vineyards sprawling under California sun, boardrooms echoing with deals that could make or break empires. It meant straight, white picket fences, and heirs who didn't kiss boys under the vineyard trellises at midnight. I bolted from that room before the echoes died, tires screeching out of the estate's gravel drive toward the Golden Gate, the fog swallowing me whole like it knew I was running from more than just a will reading. San Francisco had always been my escape, the city where I'd come out at 18 to a father who responded with silence thicker than the morning mist, and where I'd built a life at UC Berkeley that felt real. Lectures on queer theory, late-night coffees with activists who saw me, not the shadow of my golden boy brother. But that inheritance gutted me deeper than I let on, a fresh scar on top of the old ones, because the family business wasn't just vines and bottles. It was the heartbeat of who we were, the Ramirez Winery, poured into every glass from Sonoma to the world. Lorenzo wasted no time. Within weeks, he was strutting through the Napa headquarters like he'd invented grapes, slashing budgets for efficiency, firing the old-timers who'd pruned those rows since before I was born. Dad, fading in his leather armchair with oxygen tubes snaking like accusations, just nodded along, his eyes milky with approval for the son who fit the mold. Me? I was back on campus, adjunct teaching a seminar on Lading's literature, pretending the sting didn't keep me up nights, scrolling through alumni emails about exciting changes at the winery. Changes like pulling sponsorship from Berkeley's Pride Week, citing brand alignment. Alignment, as if our family's roots, immigrants from Jalisco who'd clawed their way to American soil, hadn't bloomed from the very diversity they now shunned. That's when Caesar walked into my life, or maybe crashed, depending on how you sliced it. It was a Thursday in October, the kind where eucalyptus leaves crunch underfoot and the bay wind carries a bite that promises rain. He was a transfer student in my class, 22 with eyes like polished obsidian and a laugh that rolled out low and warm, like thunder over the hills. "Professor Ramirez," he'd said after lecture, leaning against my office doorframe with a stack of books under one arm. "Your take on Anzaldúa. It's like you get it, the borderlands inside us all." I froze, pen mid-scribble, because no one had ever said that without pity. Caesar was undocumented, a DACA kid fighting for his poli-sci degree, while working nights at a taqueria in the Mission. We talked for an hour that day, about hybrid identities, the ache of being caught between worlds, and by the time the sun dipped, it felt like he'd uncorked something in me I'd kept sealed since the boardroom. Our first real date was at the vineyard's edge, ironic as hell, under a harvest moon that turned the rose silver. No grand gestures, just a blanket, takeout tamales from his abuela's recipe, and stories swapped like secrets. He told me about crossing the border at 12, the desert's cruel whisper, and I confessed the boardroom betrayal, how Dad's choice felt like erasing me from the family vine. Caesar's hand found mine in the dark, calloused fingers lacing through smooth ones, and when he kissed me, it was soft, tentative, like tasting a vintage you'd aged too long. "You're not erased, Alex," he murmured against my lips, breath tasting of spice and promise. "You're the root that keeps it all alive." For the first time since the gavel fell, I believed in something beyond survival. Us, tangled in the vines, hearts sinking like the pulse of the earth. But Lorenzo's ambition was a weed choking everything good. He pivoted the winery hard, chasing corporate bucks with a line of premium blends marketed to tech bros in the valley. Flavors like Silicon Sauvignon, ads featuring all-white casts toasting in minimalist lofts. Whispers started on campus, our alumni donations funding anti-diversity workshops at Berkeley, speakers railing against woke agendas, while sipping Ramirez Reserve. Caesar heard it first, his jaw tightening over coffee one morning. "They're sponsoring that meritocracy summit next month," he said, sliding a flyer across the table. "The one with the guy who calls immigration reform a hoax. Your brother's really swinging for the fences." Huh. I laughed it off at first, bitter as over-oaked Chardonnay, but the knot in my gut twisted tighter. Dad's health tanked around then. Pneumonia from the vine's damp mornings, and Lorenzo flew in for photo ops, all concerned while rerouting estate funds to his pet projects. I visited the hospital alone, holding Dad's hand as monitors beeped like accusations. "Why him, Papa?" I whispered, voice cracking. He squeezed weakly, eyes fluttering. "Lorenzo. He's the face. You're the heart, Mijo. But hearts break." It was the closest he'd come to an apology, and it gutted me worse than silence. The scandal hit like a nor'easter off the bay, fast and furious, in early December. Berkeley's campus was already a powder keg, protests brewing over tuition hikes and slashed queer resources. When the summit rolled in, Caesar and his activist crew had planned a counter-rally, nothing violent, just voices amplified outside the Poly ballroom. But Lorenzo, ever the showman, decided to engage, striding in with security and a Ramirez banner like he owned the moral high ground. What he didn't count on was the leaked emails, his emails, surfacing mid-event, forwarded anonymously to the student paper. Directives to the marketing team to tone down the rainbow in Pride sponsorships, jokes about keeping the queers at bay to appeal to real Americans. Chaos erupted. Protesters surged, signs clashing with barricades. Chants of "Boycott Ramirez" echoed off the Campanile as news vans swarmed Sather Gate. Lorenzo, cornered on stage, sputtered denials into a mic that broadcast his panic nationwide. "This is a smear. Fake news from radicals." But the emails were ironclad, timestamps glowing like indictments, and by nightfall, Ramirez's betrayal was trending from Oakland to D.C. The winery stock, public since Dad's expansion, plummeted 40% in after-hours trading, partners pulling out like rats from a sinking ship. I got the call from Caesar at 2 a.m., his voice a lifeline in the storm. "Alex, it's bad. They're naming you in the coverage, the gay brother who warned them. But Lorenzo's saying you leaked it to sabotage him." Betrayal hit like vertigo, the room spinning as I scrolled the feeds. My face pixelated in thumbnails, Lorenzo's statement painting me as the vengeful outsider. He'd twisted the knife, using my queerness as the villain's motive, all to save his skin. I drove through the rain-slicked streets to Caesar's cramped apartment in the Mission, pounding on the door until he yanked it open, pulling me inside without a word. We collapsed on his threadbare couch, rain drumming the window like judgment, and I broke, sobs racking me as I spilled it all. The boardroom, Dad's half-apology, the fear that I'd lose everything, even this fragile us. Caesar held me through it, his heartbeat steady against my cheek, whispering, "You're not the villain here. You're the one who sees the rot." In that moment, soaked and shattered, he kissed my temple, then my jaw, then deeper, an anchor in the gale. Not passion's fire, but love's quiet forge, reminding me I wasn't alone. Dawn broke gray and unrelenting, but clarity came with the coffee. I couldn't let the winery die on lies, not the legacy Dad had poured his soul into. Immigrants' dreams bottled against the odds. With Caesar's hand in mine, we pieced together the counter-narrative. I'd go public, not with rage, but truth. A press conference on the library steps, rain be damned, where I'd read the emails aloud, then testify to the heart of Ramirez, the workers Dad honored, the vines that didn't discriminate in their yield. The crowd swelled by noon. Students with rainbow flags, vineyard hands bust in from Napa, even a few old board members with guilty eyes. Microphones thrust forward, cameras whirring. I stepped up, Caesar a solid shadow at my side. "My brother betrayed more than the brand," I said, voice steady as the foghorn in the distance. "He betrayed the people who made it, us, the border crossers, the lovers who don't fit the script. But this winery, it's not his to ruin. It's ours." I laid out the fixes. Reinstating Pride funds tenfold, diversity hires from the ground up, a scholarship for queer-lading students in Dad's name. Gasps rippled, then cheers, the rain mingling with applause like absolution. Lorenzo slunk away that night, his empire in tatters, whispering of lawsuits that never materialized. Dad passed a week later, peaceful in his sleep, a half-smile on his lips as if he'd heard the redemption from afar. The board called me back, unanimous, tearful, handing the keys not as pity, but earned grace. Caesar and I walked those vineyard rows at sunset, his arm around my waist, the earth soft underfoot. We saved it, he said, simple as that. And in the quiet, with grapes ripening toward another vintage, I knew he meant more than the business. We'd saved each other, roots entwined against the storms. But legacies aren't tidy bows. They're the slow mend of scars. Caesar got his green card pushed through a non-profit-eyed fund, and we built a life in the old foreman's cottage. Bookshelves groaning with theory, nights debating over homemade posel. The winery thrived, bottles labeled with stories now, not slogans. And me? I stopped running from the disappointment tag, wearing it like a badge. The heart that didn't break, but bent toward light. In America's messy promise, where borders blur and love defies gavel falls. That's the real vintage, worth every pour.